We're back one more time, folks. Nostalgia Day on Seven Rivers Racing. I'm Dan Dyker along with Al Losi. Al is older than I am, so he is also nostalgic as we sit next to him as well, and he's kind of looking crusty. Dale Danielski with us, Starmaker Multimedia. We had to bring him back after the videos he brought us last year, which just amazed Al and I right here in front of this this monitor. We're doing the same thing with some of the pictures that Dale has brought with us. And just before the break, we're going to show the picture again. A very familiar name to the state of Wisconsin. As we were looking at Brian Reffner, former Truck Series winner, one thing I wanted to see when we bring that picture back up is that style of car was pretty much setting a precedence across the state of Wisconsin and in auto racing.
Yeah, it was kind of an evolution, I guess you could say, going on there, where they look more like race cars, I guess, instead of, say, something you identify a little bit more with off of the street. So absolutely, it certainly was.
Again, some of the names you're going to be seeing here, we know Matt Kenseth been racing at La Crosse so many times now. His son Ross has raced at La Crosse, so primarily with the ASA Tour. Look at that shot right there.
Look at the hair.
Yeah, well, we had briefly looked at the 8 car was actually Matt Kenseth when he first got racing. And, of course, here we have Dave Watson, who did much racing in this area, went on to win ASA championships, won many races at the Milwaukee Mile, and did compete in NASCAR. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention Ernie Tuff here. This car went down to Daytona back in the early 60s, had Fireball Roberts driving it. Ernie, of course, has a lot of history in this area, and they actually set a number of records when they took that car right there, which still exists down there. So we have to keep Ernie included in all this, because he was really a pioneer when it came to that. One of the very first to go down south from,
That's
from up here.
One of the notes you have here is really interesting, that he told Dick Trickle to go down and race south, and Dick did 25 years later.
True story. He kept trying to get Dick to go down. He says, you got to go down there. You know, this is a place you got to race, get established. It's going to be a big deal. And he really never did until much later.
Of course, he was 48 when he won Rookie of the Year.
Exactly. Yeah, he definitely went much later.
Kind of isn't fair to include him as a rookie at 48.
No, that was an exception, I guess, kind of to the rule there.
A couple other shots right here. That car number, very familiar to the state of Wisconsin, so is the Sauter name out of Nisita.
Very famous, the patriarch Jim Sauter here in the 5 car. He did the ASA thing, won championships, eventually got a shot down south, did very well, almost won the Daytona 500 one year, and he kind of dabbled in it. He didn't really get a full-time ride, but he did get there, ran the super speedways, and did very well.
I see you have J.D. Stacy as the owner. He had some good equipment.
Yeah, at that time, J.D. came into the sport and had like 7 cars, 7 teams, and he kind of faded as fast as he came in, but it did provide an opportunity for a number of guys like Jim Sauter to at least have a shot and see how they could do.
And would you agree that the Sauter name, if you look at Jim and Jay all the way down to the youngsters racing at La Crosse here a couple of years ago, would you say that the Sauter name had to have been probably the biggest name to come out of the state because of all the generations that were racing?
Well, I think in terms of sheer volume, sheer numbers, I mean, they had like 11 kids, you know, and
one every year.
They all raced.
If you didn't race, you sat out back.
Yeah, I think even the girls dabbled in it a little bit, you know, because it wasn't all boys in that family.
They're racing go-karts now, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The younger ones.
And, of course, Johnny Sauter is probably the latest now, you know, to really
Johnny
make his mark.
Somewhat winning the Oktoberfest race last year. Had some technicality issues afterwards, but you had the very familiar 43 and had the red car, and again, a lot of the Sauters. And very interesting. I would like to see some video of our next picture right here.
Well, I wish I had it. That's Rich Bickle. Again, in a little bit earlier time, Rich did very well up here and did venture south and ran very well in the Truck Series. Rich still does some racing up in the north here, and he still gets down there and does some stuff too. So
he's been at. I saw him race back in the early 2000s at WIR in Kokona. He went up against Sterling Marlin in a 20-lap one-on-one race, a kind of an intermission type thing. And it was interesting because Bickle wasn't going to beat Marlin. Marlin toyed with him and let him get right on a bumper end or right on his rear end and then would take off. And this went on for about 15 laps, and of course the crowd loved that. Another one that we're going to show here in a minute, DW. Well, how many times did DW race at La Crosse?
Well, you know, I can't say for a fact a number, but I do know that he was up here and did, at one point, Mark Martin had broken his leg, could not race the car.
Right.
So Darrell got into that car and he ended up winning the main event here at La Crosse.
And he's one of those guys that definitely remembers La Crosse. When I was doing the Cup stuff, we were sitting at the Narita airport, my wife and I, and we had lunch with Stevie, Darrell's wife, and himself. And we mentioned that we were from Wisconsin, and he went into a long history or a long story that only DW can do about La Crosse and the whole area and everything he loved about the area. It was quite a bit of fun sitting there listening to him.
They do remember. I mean, it still stands out in their mind, all those guys that did go on to bigger things, but Wisconsin and here in La Crosse were definitely significant as part of their careers.
Mm-hmm. Next series of photos, names that are not your typical household type names, but again, are folks that did a lot for racing here in Wisconsin, whether it was the body style, whether it was the motor, whether it was the way that they raced, or maybe even just a memorable car number.
Well, and Mike Miller actually moved from Minnesota to Wisconsin just to race. That competition, 5-night-a-week thing we were talking about.
Right.
His famous number 18 cars graced Victory Circle and we're at championship banquets a number of times. Terry Bivens is one that came from Kansas to race up here frequently. And he ended up finishing, I believe, second in the Rookie of the Year battle in NASCAR Cup racing. So, I mean, there's another connection there that ended up being connected to the South as well. And Miller, backtracking a little, he did actually go down and run a little bit in Cup racing. Didn't do as well as he wanted. Came back up here, and but anyway, he was one that did that as well. Bob Seneker, pretty well-known name back in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s. ASA champ, actually did some NASCAR racing, raced on the big tracks, and
he was dominant in the ASA series.
Absolutely.
Him and Mike Eddy.
Very, very successful in that series.
And of course, I think we have one more photo that we're going to put up right here in names synonymous with auto racing. The very familiar number 2 of Mark Martin.
The Kid, that's what he was known as. He started racing when he was, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, somewhere in there. And I think he was already running what's now called the super late models, which is, what you'd see here. And by the time he was 18 years old, so I guess that's the moniker of the Kid. But he came up here and raced and won.
When was the last time that they had a 100-lap race at La Crosse Speedway?
Well,
probably about 5 years ago.
And I'm talking outside of ASA. I mean, just a regular, here right there, won a late model race at the La Crosse Speedway. When was the last time that they ran that long of a race at La Crosse Speedway with no Oktoberfest involved?
Yeah, the late models, we did it at the halfway point about 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was a very common occurrence through the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. But as far as say just a regular show, it used to be you'd have your regular shows, your 30-lap features. Then you'd put that 50 or 100 lapper in there, and it's not like it used to be.
They kind of got away from it because your gas tanks wouldn't hold enough. There was a lot of other issues, so we haven't done it. And I think that when we did it about 5 years ago, it had been a long time since they had done it.
And I know there's a number of these we've missed. Jimmy Johnson has raced out here. There are others, but hopefully the folks have got a chance to see that this place is really special, created a lot of history, and really it continues to create it today.
Well, we're going to give Dale another year to compile more of those photos that you missed today, because this is getting tough. This is going to be an annual occurrence. If you do like what you saw today, if you've got some fond memories of maybe the drivers or maybe some of the drivers who were in the background, maybe if you were standing there in the stands behind a photo of one, drop us an email. And we'd love to hear from you. We've gotten a couple off the video portion that we did with Dale the last time he was in. And you've got an email that they can send to us.
And it's a website that you can go to. And there's a little form. You can fill it out, put your name in there, your email, and then give us your story on what you enjoyed about the show or any of the other shows that we do. And the website is www.fansarena.com. facebook.com/7riversracing.html, and it's the number 7.
Or else you can hit me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/7riversracing. The Mississippi Thunder Race Report on AM 580 WKTY starts on the, well, it started earlier this year, rolling right along. We're going to try to get Dale in. You know, in radio, we paint a picture for you. Here you're seeing videos and pictures. We're going to see how good Dale is on the radio with painting pictures.
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah. Well, I look forward to it.
Back in the day. Dale Danielski with Starmaker Multimedia. Does a whole lot more than just this. So find him, Google search him, or find him on Facebook as well. For Al Losey, I'm Dan Diker. Thanks for spending some years with us as nostalgia continued here today on 7 Rivers Racing, KQEG TV.